Suddenly, they spot a caravan approaching from the side, with people on horses. Lloyd Frontera wonders who they are. Javier identifies them as Viscount Lacona's group from the north of the Merritt's wetlands. A brown-haired man in the caravan asks who is in charge of the project. Javier advises him to show some manners, but Lloyd Frontera stops him and identifies himself as the one in charge, asking if he can help them with something. The brown-haired man reveals that the land belongs to Viscount Lacona and orders them to leave immediately. Lloyd Frontera expresses surprise at not being aware of this and asks if there's a way to resolve the situation. Lloyd Frontera and Javier arrive at Marty's wetlands. Lloyd Frontera reflects that for hundreds of years, people haven't set foot on this wasteland. However, for administrative purposes, the northern parts belong to Viscount Lacona and the southern parts belong to Baron Frontera. He contemplates that Viscount Lacona waited until the land was reclaimed to assert his ownership, attempting to seize hold of this rich, fertile land without putting in any effort of his own. He acknowledges that the northern part of wetlands does belong to Viscount Lacona, at least for now. Addressing Viscount Lacona, Lloyd Frontera questions whether he is suggesting that they are trespassing on his lordship's land. A brown-haired man affirms that, as a subject of His Royal Highness, Viscount Lacona was granted rights to this land. Lloyd Frontera responds by dismissing him, stating that they are noblemen having a conversation and questioning why someone of lower status wouldn't keep his mouth shut. The brown-haired man becomes irritated, and the soldiers look at him surprisingly. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera steps forward, bowing down, and introduces himself as the eldest son of Baron Frontera. Viscount Lacona acknowledges having heard of his crude behavior, expressing that he has nothing to say to him and instructs him to bring his father. Javier observes and thinks about how rude Viscount Lacona is. Annoyed, Lloyd Frontera puts his finger in his ear, and Viscount Lacona asks if he doesn't hear him, instructing him to bring Baron Frontera. Lloyd Frontera refuses, stating that he can hear quite well, likening the request to the buzzing of some pesky fly. Viscount Lacona questions where the fly is and looks around quickly. The brown-haired man whispers to him that Lloyd Frontera is insulting him. Viscount Lacona becomes angry and asks if he really did this. The man replies, citing the Land Act of the Kingdom Title 321, claiming special exemption regarding the development of barren land. Viscount Lacona shouts "wait a minute" and directs abusive remarks at him. In response, he calmly states Clause 1 is the aim, explaining that the aim of the law pertains to the development of long-standing barren land and the establishment of ownership of the reclaimed land. Viscount Lacona urges him to listen, and he proceeds with Clause 2's definition, clarifying that barren land refers to land that has been abandoned for over 100 years, with no residential or cultivation activities taking place. Continuing, he details Clause 3 is ownership. Any land meeting the specified requirements will be recognized as belonging to the developer of the barren land. He outlines the criteria. First, the land must be developed with a clear purpose through the investment of capital and labor. Second, it must be capable of supporting a residential building. Third, it should support long-term agricultural activity. He adds the fourth condition, stating that the land must have produced at least one harvest of a crop variety specified by law. As he walks, he takes a vegetable from the ground as an example. He instructs them to take these seeds, plant them all the way over there, and look after them. It's to get rid of the pests while handing over a bag of seeds. Congratulating everyone, he witnesses the historic first-ever harvest of the Marty's wetlands, stating there is no charge. He is not that harsh and laughs. Viscount Lacona wonders where this brat came from and ponders if he planned all of this ahead of them. The vegetable is given to Viscount Lacona with the words here, "Take this as a gift," and a request for him to please leave the land. Viscount Lacona becomes irritated, and they all walk away. Javier asks if he heard a prophecy somewhere about their arrival. He questions what this prophecy is and states it isn't his first time dealing with those types of leeches trying to steal someone else's hard work. After a while, the soldiers become so excited and exclaim Master Lloyd has saved their land, 3 cheers for him. He looks at them and asks if he is paying them to cheer for him, then instructs them to get back to work. The heavy rain starts and waters his plants. He sits near the plants and reflects that with summer over, fall has arrived, bringing heavy rains. He has run hundreds of simulations, but there's no room for complacency. Javier comes and lifts an umbrella for him, while he thinks he needs to stay and ensure everything until the end. He needs to see if the Marty's wetlands can indeed be of use. After some time, the rain stops, and the system notifies him of a monumental achievement in construction. He has left an indelible mark in the history of civil engineering on the Laurasia continent. As a reward, he has received a large amount of skill experience. The system notifies him that the surveying skill has been upgraded by 2 levels, reaching intermediate surveying level 3 and adding land costs appraisal and subterranean scanning. The system once again notifies him that the design skill has been upgraded by 2 levels, achieving intermediate design level 3 and introducing map printing, floor plan marking, and 2D/3D simulation mode. He receives other notifications indicating that his approval rating with the Baron has increased by +5, as well as with the Baroness, Javier, Byron, and the townspeople, all by +5, except with the townspeople, which is +3. His current RP reaches 13. He smiles and says all done. Now, on to the next stage. Meanwhile, in the Locona Viscounty, Viscount Locona exclaims, "What's that reclaimed land migration incentives?" He angrily slams his hand on the table. The administrator confirms that they are providing the land for free with full protection for 3 years. However, in exchange, the residents must live there for 5 years, and migration is being restricted. Viscount Locona responds, saying which means the residents will spend the last 2 years furiously cultivating the land, and they'll be the owners. It's their land. He thinks about the Marty's wetlands becoming the golden goose laying her golden eggs and feels a pang of jealousy, realizing it was his land and half of it belonged to him. He places his hand on his belly, which shines. Determined not to give up this fertile land, he calls the administrator again and instructs them to bring in the supervisor of the dye workshop. A few days later, in the morning, Lloyd Frontera wakes up in his bed and wonders why his head hurts so much. He contemplates if all the long days have finally caught up with him. Despite the pain, he realizes he can't just roll around in bed and needs to organize the sections and distribution allotment. He calls Javier to get up, informing him that he's heading to work. He questions why Javier looks so out of it and asks if he's also that tired. Javier, holding his head, gets up and mentions that this has never happened before, and the headache is quite severe. He thinks for a moment, considering if it can't be that. Emily, the maid of the Baron's estate, enters the room and apologizes, mentioning that she has had a bad headache since early in the morning. Mr. Punny Alep, a village farmer, also holds his head and informs them that it's not just him. His wife and little ones all have headaches. As he carries cow food on his shoulder, Michael, the farm boy in charge of the cows, adds that the cows have stopped drinking water since yesterday, risking dehydration. Lloyd Frontera and Javier come out into the village. Lloyd Frontera observes that it's affecting everyone in the village, and animals are avoiding water. He thinks he knew it. The water must be causing this. Reflecting on the situation, he acknowledges that one of the strongest weapons he has right now is his knowledge of this world, similar to the book Night of Blood and Fire. However, he also realizes that after the wild ant incident, there are things that don't appear in the novel. Considering Viscount Lacona's possible interest in reclaiming the Merit's wetland, he did some research into those individuals and uncovered something noteworthy. He contemplates that the Lacona region's primary source of income lies in their mysterious dyeing technology and the Ladona berry used for their dye. Realizing the potential impact, he becomes angry and directs abuses toward Lacona. The scene then shifts to the palace, where Arcos Frontera inquires about what was just said. The brown-haired person explains that it shouldn't have been difficult for him to understand. They demand half of the reclaimed Marty's wetlands, and in return, they will cease dumping their dye wastewater. Arcos Frontera reacts, stating that what they are doing is blackmail. The brown-haired person acknowledges it as blackmail, and when confronted about not fearing the law, he confidently replies that they are prepared to face legal consequences. He suggests Arcos Frontera could take him to court before Viscount Locona. Arcos Frontera, expressing his anger, questions whether the brown-haired person is not afraid of the law. He vows to formally take him to court before Viscount Locona, slamming his hands on the table. Unperturbed, the brown-haired person insists Arcos Frontera should go ahead and take legal action, asserting that he may even win. However, he points out that it will take at least 2 years for a verdict, and with legal fees and the cost of obtaining new drinking water, will Arcos Frontera be able to hold out for so long? Meanwhile, they both stand up, and the brown-haired man says well then, he looks forward to his wise decision. Lloyd Frontera firmly states that his son and his people have invested blood and sweat into the land, and he will not give a lowlife like the brown-haired man a single inch of it. In response, the brown-haired man bows down in front of him. Seizing the opportunity, Lloyd Frontera and Javier open the door and swiftly subdue him, causing him to fall. Lloyd Frontera then reveals that it seems their parasitic neighbors have been tampering with their river water. He bows and suggests discussing countermeasures. The brown-haired person, angered, questions if he just insulted his master. He replies that he scared him, expressing surprise that parasite scum could understand humans. In response, the brown-haired person draws his sword and declares in anger that he has insulted the honor of this knight twice. In the name of Kernot, he challenges Lloyd Frontera to a duel. They both go out and engage in a duel. Lloyd Frontera repeatedly strikes the brown-haired man's head with a shovel, causing him to cry out and plead for mercy, saying he yields and begging Lloyd Frontera to stop hitting him. Lloyd Frontera agrees, stating that he's satisfied, but then mentions that it's for treating the Baron with disrespect and continues hitting him again and again. Arcos Frontera excitedly questions him about why he's still attacking when the duel is over. Javier observes the Baron, noting that he has never seen him like this. After some time, the brown-haired man returns and meets Viscount Locona. The Viscount comments that he told the man to go blackmail them, and instead, he received a beating. The brown-haired man pleads for forgiveness, but Viscount Locona, turning his mustaches, thinks for a moment and then says to wait a minute. He states that it's good work and that the only thing the Baron can do now is take them to court. Viscount Locona suggests that they can frame it as an assault by a reckless aristocrat, adding 4 years to the whole process, and he laughs. After a while, Lloyd Frontera laughs and expresses that he probably understands what Viscount Locona is thinking. However, he asserts that the Frontera barony will never engage in something so wasteful. He declares that they will overcome the situation through their own means, emphasizing that they've worked this land with their blood, sweat, and tears. He states their commitment to protecting it from the evil of greed. Lloyd Frontera outlines their plan. First, they will address the drinking water problem by constructing a reservoir. They dig a hole to store water, and Hameng fills the pond. Lloyd Frontera envisions humans bringing water from an upstream location before it becomes polluted. The system notifies him that Hameng's skill is at level 3. Javier observes the pond and acknowledges it as a good solution. However, he notes that neither he nor Hameng will be able to rest for even a day. Lloyd Frontera agrees, acknowledging that this is only a temporary solution. He reveals their intention to construct a water supply system and build infrastructure to bring in water from Lake Capua in the eastern mountains. Javier asserts that the distance is considerable and only the labor involved would be beneficial. He responds, acknowledging it as a significant loss, but assures that he will ensure a substantial fee for the construction. He claims to be aiming for a 10, perhaps even 100 times, profit as he walks away. Several months later, the scene shifts. Viscount Locona examines some documents and becomes irritated, biting his nails. He questions how such a situation could occur, and the administrator informs him that Baron Frontera's eldest son is requesting an audience. Viscount Locona, in frustration, shouts that he is busy and instructs them to leave. The administrator insists that they are here to assist with any problems he may be facing. Lloyd arrives to meet him and expresses surprise at how well Viscount Locona looks. Viscount Locona asks what he wants and Lloyd replies, asking if he still needs to hear that they've come to help him with his problems. Viscount inquires about the nonsense he is talking about and states that he doesn't have any problems. Lloyd insists, suggesting that perhaps he could help save his crumbling dye workshop. Viscount Locona accuses him of being the one who ruined his dye workshop. Calmly seated on the sofa, Lloyd Frontera acknowledges that it was quite an undertaking, truth be told. He expresses gratitude for the wastewater he deliberately discharged into their water supply, necessitating the importation of water all the way from Lake Capua. Initially, they had no idea that he had intentionally dumped wastewater, and it was his lovely knight who was kind enough to inform them of this. Lloyd continues, recounting how they dug out a path from the lake to their land, laid down the pipes, buried them, and encountered various challenges along the way. Viscount Locona, expressing frustration, dismisses the idle chatter, demanding to know what he did to his dye workshop while tapping his hand on the table in anger. Lloyd replies, stating that he is impatient and urges him to hold on as he is getting to that part. Continuing, he describes the situation where they encountered an enormous valley in the middle of their route. Lloyd then poses a rhetorical question, asking what Viscount Locona thinks they did, emphasizing that they had no other choice. According to him, they had to erect a Roman-style aqueduct, and significant effort was put into blasting out limestone for use as building material. Meanwhile, he mentions that some of the limestone accidentally covered the bottom of the valley floor, exposing the entire limestone bedrock. Viscount Locona interrupts, shouting, demanding to know the relevance of all this to his dye workshop. He responds, explaining that the water from that valley flows down to his workshop, and it's the lime in the water that has ruined all of his clothes. Viscount Locona, in anger, shouts about fearing the law and threatens to sue him at the royal court. The response indicates that it would take at least 2 years for a verdict, questioning whether anyone would remember his goods by then. Viscount Locona verbally abuses him, calling him a good-for-nothing brat. In conclusion, he states that if he has addressed his queries about his problems, he will be taking his leave. Viscount Locona warns him that he has messed with the wrong man, boasting about his connections at the royal court. He threatens to make him pay for damages many times over. Lloyd Frontera expresses confusion, stating that there is something he does not understand and asks Javier to clarify. Javier explains that all he did was provoke and infuriate Viscount Locona, predicting that the Viscount will likely continue the legal battle until the bitter end. He notes that Viscount Locona has numerous connections in the capital, and if a legal battle ensues, it will be costly. Lloyd acknowledges and tells Javier to wait, saying they'll see who has more to lose. 1 month later, Viscount Locona bows down and admits wrongdoing, pleading for help to save his dye workshop. Lloyd questions if his affluent connections advised him that he couldn't win the case, considering he had already lost when his man admitted to intentional misbehavior. Viscount Locona admits imprudence and expresses deep regret. Lloyd, uninterested in his words, considers the situation. Viscount Locona persists, emphasizing how he is laying down his pride and begging for help. Meanwhile, he responds, questioning the value of what Viscount Locona calls pride. He asks if it is worth even 1/10 of a gold piece, stating that he would sell it 1,000, no, even 10,000 times over. He clarifies that he does not seek an apology. All he wants is a simple signature. If Viscount Locona signs the document, they can begin supplying water to his workshop within a week, and he will receive a contract. Viscount Locona screams, arguing that the price is excessively high and questions how one can put a price on water. He points out the irony, noting that the person who taught him that water is not free was Viscount Locona himself. After a while, he approaches his father, Lloyd Frontera, who inquires if they are indeed receiving such a large sum every month while examining the contract. He affirms this, mentioning that the Viscount even signed it himself. He remarks that with this money, they can repay all the interest and still have some left over. He applauds and acknowledges the Viscount's generosity, laughing and reflecting that although the Viscount initiated the conflict, it ultimately brought positive results for their people and their lord. However, now the Viscount seems almost like the devil. He continues to laugh, contemplating that the contract lacks a specified end date. This implies that they will be extracting resources from the Viscount until the day he dies, metaphorically capturing him with chains. He asserts that even long after the Viscount's demise, they will continue to exploit that bloodline for generations, emphasizing that he cannot let the Viscount escape with just a slap on the wrist. He contemplates that if he could exchange his blood vessels for money, he would rip it all right out of him. Lloyd Frontera interrupts, saying that he has some good news to share, and asks why his face appears unsettling, stating that he's scaring him. The person replies with an apology, explaining that he is just so happy about the contract. Lloyd Frontera proceeds to discuss the old, beat-up treasure received from the Orc tribe, mentioning that Count Cremo has expressed interest in purchasing it for a handsome price. The person responds, expressing confusion as someone as influential as Count Cremo could easily acquire similar items brand new. Lloyd Frontera agrees, stating he doesn't know all the details but shares that Count Cremo intends to use them to construct a statue. The scene shifts to Cremo, City of Commerce, where Count Cremo stands near a window and observes the bulge in the river. A giant monster, Gigatitan, emerges from the water and lets out a roar. Javier states that they will be leaving in 1 week and the waterworks in Lacona will be finished around then to minimize expenses. He mentions that he only wants about 10 men to accompany them. Lloyd Frontera, understanding Lloyd's preference, continues to cut the branches of a tree. Javier reassures him not to worry, as he will closely monitor Master Lloyd. He then reflects on a past incident when a knight from Viscount Lacona attempted to blackmail him into giving away half of the reclaimed Merit's wetlands. In the past, he would have been terrified and simply handed it over. However, after observing Lloyd's efforts and the people involved, he has found some courage of his own. He admits to having an indecisive and incompetent lord. Javier contradicts this, asserting that it's not true. He emphasizes that Arcos Frontera has always been the kindest and warmest person, more so than anyone else. Meanwhile, Arcos Frontera looks at him and smiles, expressing appreciation for his words. However, he adds that he can't claim to be a good lord solely based on those compliments. He believes a leader should possess firm principles and be willing to take action, just like Lloyd is doing at present. Javier reflects on Lloyd's apparent principle being money, but refrains from vocalizing it, contemplating whether pursuing wealth is truly a bad thing. Javier stands up and announces that his mission is no longer to monitor Lloyd. From now on, he requests to be entrusted with protecting Lloyd, the heir of the land. Javier agrees, stating that he will do as requested. He privately thinks that Lloyd Frontera has miraculously managed to revive his lord's fortunes, yet he could never end up liking him. Arcos Frontera inquires about Javier's aspirations for the future, offering assistance with anything he can. Javier reveals his desire to become a knight and protect his lord. He laughs and expresses gratitude, thanking him very much. He mentions that he managed to survive that harsh winter all alone, so he is confident he will become the world's strongest knight. The Baron then presented him with a wooden sword that he had carved himself, emphasizing the uniqueness of that wooden sword. He laughs again, stating that an orphan like him can become a knight, and he can keep dreaming and try again in his next life. He places the wooden sword on the stairs and breaks it. Afterward, Javier returns to his room, removes his coat, and looks at the broken wooden sword, which he hangs on the wall. He reflects that he could never end up liking him. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera becomes excited, welcoming his dear customer and expressing gratitude for seeking out Frontera lullaby services once again. He mentions that he can't live without him anymore, asserting that he has become addicted. He adds a threat, stating that if his instructions are not followed, he could suspend his services. Javier responds, noting that he says the same thing every time and suggests they just begin. Despite his expectations to dislike Lloyd, he observes that Lloyd seems like a completely different person. Lloyd Frontera utters the phrase Red Sun, intending to activate the sleep-inducing command. However, Javier is already asleep, and he contemplates hating himself for thinking Lloyd is a decent person. While he also falls asleep, a brown-haired man secretly sneaks into their room through the window. The intruder blames Lord Lloyd Frontera for something and attempts to stab him, commanding him to die. Javier quickly wakes up, throws his pillow away, and rushes to block the attack, drawing his sword. In the scuffle, Javier manages to cut the brown-haired person's sword and grabs and throws him onto the floor. Lloyd Frontera also wakes up during the commotion. The following morning, soldiers commence their work to install the pipes, with Lloyd Frontera standing nearby and emphasizing the importance of safety first. Javier approaches and informs him that they handed the man over to Viscount Lacona. Lloyd acknowledges it as good work, but Javier reveals that the man targeted him specifically. Lloyd explains that Viscount Lacona has been paying a lot for the water, suggesting that he probably fired the man first. He admits that he would have done the same, given his high payment, despite being regularly beaten up by the neighboring brat. The man sought revenge against him for this reason. Lloyd comments on the small-minded thinking of such individuals. Javier questions if this means that Lloyd was expecting such an incident, to which Lloyd clarifies that not exactly, but he thought something like this could happen. Javier then suggests it was complacent of him to not take any precautions, adding that he always plans for every eventuality. Javier thinks to himself that Lloyd seems to consider and plan for all possibilities in advance. Lloyd Frontera asks what he is talking about and mentions that he has him beside him, so what other precautions does he need to take? He attributes his ability to move around freely to Javier, expressing trust in him. He asks him to consider the fact that a 5-year-old boy who lost his village in a monster attack managed to survive the winter with Javier's help. He points out that the boy is now standing there as a knight, questioning if there is anything more dependable than that. Feeling awkward, he wonders why Javier doesn't say something and regrets being so cringe. Javier, in his thoughts, expresses self-disdain for thinking that way. Lloyd Frontera laughs and remarks that it was a very Javier-like reaction, laughing again. Javier considers Lloyd Frontera to be a decent man, and the system notifies him that Javier Esrahan is finally releasing his long-term resentment, resulting in a 15-point increase in his approval rating. His approval rating then increases by an additional 6 points. The system informs him that he has earned 320 RP for significantly improving his relationship, bringing his current RP to 1675. Lloyd Frontera mentions that they will finish building the waterworks by tomorrow and suggests going to Cremo to earn a substantial profit. Lloyd Frontera sits behind Javier on a horse and dozes off. After some time, he wakes up and asks if Javier hit him just now. Javier denies it. He questions if Javier is sure because it feels like it. Javier responds by asking if he saw him do it. Lloyd Frontera suggests that he thought to himself call himself noble, and he can't even ride a horse, and finds it annoying, leading him to hit Javier. Javier remarks that it's incredible, as it seems Lloyd can now read minds. Lloyd persists, asking if Javier admits to hitting him. Javier firmly denies it, stating he wouldn't dream of doing such a thing. Lloyd dismisses it, calling Javier petty, and instructs everyone to stop. He jumps down from the horse and asks Javier to teach him how to ride. Javier refuses, stating he's a knight, not a horse-riding instructor. The system notifies that what Javier truly meant is that he admires Lloyd's attitude to strive to learn what he doesn't know. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera issues an order, and the system notifies that what Lloyd truly means is that he's determined to work hard. Working hard comes easily to him, and he believes he'll give his best effort. Javier also dismounts from the horse, questioning Lloyd about what he just said. The system attributes Lloyd's positive mindset to Javier's kindness, describing his heart and soul as that of an angel. Lloyd, annoyed, tells the status window to stop being noisy and calls it a nonsense translator, attracting the attention of everyone present. Javier asks what's wrong all of a sudden and questions if Lloyd has lost his mind. The status window repeats Javier's inquiry about what's wrong all of a sudden and if Lloyd has lost his mind. As Lloyd looks at the status window, another notification appears, stating that rumors about him building the first waterworks on this continent are spreading rapidly. His reputation as an engineer has increased, and his name will be remembered in the construction history of both the kingdom and the continent. His reputation as an engineer has increased, and his name will be remembered in the construction history of both the kingdom and the continent. The system notifies him about a bonus of plus 600 RP, bringing his current RP to 2275. Excitement fills him as he realizes that this is a jackpot, indicating the potential to secure even more significant construction projects in the future. He understands that reputation translates to money, and money means a sweet retirement with a golden future awaiting him. The system notifies him again, suggesting that he has truly lost his mind. Javier, observing Lloyd's shifting emotions, asks if he has lost his mind, going from anger to laughter in a short span. Irritated by the constant messages, Lloyd sits on the horse while Javier walks in front, holding its reins. Lloyd reflects that the journey to Cremo was definitely not a short one, and as they approached, winter drew near, causing them to reach Cremo only in midwinter. After a while, they arrive in Cremo, and Count Cremo warmly greets Lloyd, thanking him for making the long journey. Count Cremo introduces himself as the lord of the place. Lloyd Frontera bows respectfully, expressing humble greetings and identifying himself as a member of the Frontera family. Count Cremo chuckles, noting that Lloyd is quite different from what he had imagined. Count Cremo had heard rumors about Lloyd being a talented builder, expecting someone with a rough countenance. However, he finds Lloyd's appearance to be remarkably noble, even suggesting he could pass for royalty. Count Cremo playfully asks if Lloyd is engaged, and if not, he should consider his daughter. Lloyd politely excuses himself, prompting Count Cremo to shout about the perceived insolence, questioning how a mere servant dares to interrupt the conversation between nobles. The system laughs, mocking the reference to Lloyd as a servant and finding amusement in the situation. Count Cremo laughs, acknowledging that he may have caused offense, and sincerely apologizes, urging Lloyd not to be offended. They both take their seats. Lloyd responds, saying it's fine and okay. The system notifies that the fault lies with Lloyd's face, prompting laughter. Lloyd contemplates that if he could, he would beat the system right up. Count Cremo adds that it's partly Lloyd's fault for having a face resembling that of a servant, and Lloyd silently wishes for him to stop. Thinking about Count Cremo, the influential figure in the Night of Blood and Iron in the City of Commerce, Javier becomes a wanted criminal after dealing with moneylenders Shiloh and Meatloaf. Javier goes into hiding and is eventually arrested by Count Cremo. Despite this, the Count recognizes Javier's character and integrity from their brief interaction and provides considerable support in various ways. Count Cremo expresses a desire to purchase Lloyd's jewels for decorating the statue they plan to place in the sea. Lloyd responds with surprise, questioning the idea of putting a statue in the sea. Count Cremo elaborates, mentioning that trade in Cremo has been on the decline. He explains that a few years ago, a gigantician began appearing just off the coast from their port. Although they haven't suffered direct damages, the mere presence of the gigantician instills fear. Lloyd recalls reading about this situation where they had no effective means to attack it in the water, rendering even the Navy powerless. Reflecting on the decline of Cremo, he faced a crisis. Lloyd had hoped that Javier would do something to help, but after a series of attempts, the matter concluded without a clear resolution, leaving uncertainty about a potential Season 2. Lloyd initially believed he knew everything about the place from the book, but he now realizes that even the parts that weren't fully explained are unfolding in reality. Count Cremo reveals that he conducted extensive research to drive the Gigaditan away. During this process, he made a significant discovery about mermaids, the formidable warriors who rule over the seas. He explains that mermaids are the objects of fear for the Gigatitan because they have the ability to kill them. Realizing this, Count Cremo contemplated building a statue of a mermaid in the sea to deter the Gigatitan. However, he has now abandoned that idea. Lloyd inquires about his change of plans. Count Cremo clarifies that if they raise the seabed to construct the statue, the water depth will not be sufficient for boats. Although Count Cremo assures Lloyd that he no longer has any use for the idea, he makes a promise and intends to buy the jewels. Lloyd Frontera refuses, insisting that he can't allow Count Cremo to take a loss and urges him not to buy the jewels. He responds that he won't sell the treasure. Lloyd Frontera assures him that he is willing to sell the treasure, and at a high price if possible. Additionally, he offers to build the statue without disturbing the water level in the sea channels. He contemplates using a combination of friction piles and box caissons to achieve this. Lloyd Frontera and Javier sit in a boat and navigate the river. Lloyd puts his face underwater to scan the surroundings. Assessing the flat seabed with a thick sedimentary layer, he notes the right amount of softness in the bedrock. Lloyd Frontera asks why Javier looks so happy when he takes his face out of the water. Javier apologizes, explaining that it's the first time someone suffering has made him so happy. He hands water glasses to Javier and mentions taking measurements. He casually asks if the contract is okay. He insists not to change the subject. Javier expresses his skepticism, stating that he can't imagine building up the ground vertically from the seabed unless magic is used. Lloyd Frontera responds that it is a kind of magic, referring to the magic of cement. He ponders how to create cement in this world, considering that with Roman-style cement, he should be able to do it. Upon reaching the other bank of the river, Javier offers a hand to help Lloyd Frontera out of the boat, advising him to be careful and not to watch his step. Lloyd Frontera acknowledges Javier's banter, remarking that it has reached a sword master's level, and playfully asks if Javier is a banter master. As they converse, a girl arrives and inquires if he is Master Lloyd Frontera. She mentions having something to give him and holds a letter in her hands. Lloyd Frontera questions who she is, pondering her identity. She introduces herself as Christine, Count Cremo's daughter, mentioning that she saw him walking through the mansion courtyard yesterday. Blushing, she hands Javier a love letter, requesting him to accept it. Lloyd Frontera acknowledges that he was somewhat expecting this and thinks it's fine. That's just how it is, he guesses. Javier takes the letter and places it inside his jacket. Christine leaves, expressing satisfaction that he has accepted it. As they prepare to continue, Lloyd Frontera stops Javier, accusing him of being abusive. Javier is puzzled, asking what he's talking about. Lloyd Frontera expresses annoyance at how Javier acted like nothing happened after receiving the love letter. Javier is confused and questions what's wrong with that. Lloyd Frontera becomes angry, pointing out that Javier took the love letter and put it away as if it were nothing. Javier, still not understanding, asks what's wrong with that. Lloyd Frontera, irritated, looks at Javier strangely, puts his hand on his face, and questions if he has never received a love letter before. In response, Javier apologizes and offers words of encouragement, telling Lloyd Frontera to take strength. The system window notifies him that Javier sincerely wishes him the best. Lloyd Frontera reflects that he is not jealous, not even a little bit, because he is going to be rich and make so much money. After a while, Lloyd Frontera sits on a chair angrily and Count Cremo arrives, asking what's up with his face. Quickly adjusting his expression, Lloyd Frontera apologizes, stating that he is focused on his work. Count Cremo observes that he gave him a shock, noting the intensity in his eyes. He mentions that while he managed to gather most of the materials without difficulty, obtaining volcanic ash is proving challenging. Lloyd Frontera thinks about the significance of volcanic ash as one of the key ingredients for Roman cement. He acknowledges the advantages of Roman cement, citing the lasting structures from 2,000 years ago, showcasing its durability ahead of its time. He contemplates the difficulty of obtaining volcanic ash, realizing that the best option would be to go to a volcano. However, considering the time it would take, he deems it impractical, as he can't wait that long. Lloyd Frontera reassures Count Cremo, expressing confidence in finding another solution. He decides it's time for Plan B, opting to give up on Roman cement and instead make Portland cement. After a while, he sits down and writes a letter, contemplating that Portland cement gave rise to their modern cement. While he has a general idea of how to make it, the details elude him. Determined, he decides that he must rely on brawn and commit to experimenting with various combinations if he lacks the brains. Later, Lloyd Frontera placed some stones on the table, marked a cross on paper, and reflected that sample 129 failed. He believes he's close to figuring it out, but needs to fine-tune the mixing ratio. Contemplating further, he considers that the drying process might be a factor and decides to add 4 more combinations. He expresses confidence that applying 12 ratios will yield success. Unexpectedly, Pipodong comes behind Hamang and Bangul. Pipodong jumps on his shoulder, hugging him. Lloyd Frontera tells them he's busy and to go for a walk without him. Hamang and Bangul also jump on him despite his plea, showing affection. An overwhelmed Lloyd Frontera protests that he can't because he's too busy. They persist, shaking their heads. Frustrated, he screams that he told them he is engaged. Just then, he recalls his pet dog. The story shifts into a flashback as he witnesses his dog's death and attends its funeral. Sitting near the lifeless body, he weeps, feeling remorseful for not brushing its fur one more time and not playing with it more. At that moment, he recognizes that he is the last member of his family. Returning to the present, he picks up Hamang, Pipodong and Bangul, hugging them tightly. He declares that they are more important than his research. Walking with them, he reflects on his behavior, admitting to being an awful person. The 3 of them look at him. He confesses that despite everything going well, he has treated them like machines, realizing he is the biggest moron in the world and would have had many regrets. Halting and sitting down near them, he expresses gratitude, acknowledging that the positive change is all thanks to them. They respond happily. The system window notifies that the fantastical creature confesses his sincere feelings and considers him a part of their family, and the relationship level with the fantastical creatures is described as a master-servant relationship. He looks at the system window, surprised by the revelation. It further informs him about the relationship level with the fantastical creatures, his status as a gang member, a new upgrade for the fantastical creatures, and the opportunity to add new skills for them, with the required RP being 500. He remarks this is an unexpected bonus. Pipodong, Hamang, and Bangul also begin chirping. He inquires if they want Bangul to acquire the new skills. He then agrees, saying okay if that's what they want. He believes that regardless of the skill, he can surely find a use for it, and besides, it's what they desire anyway. The system window notifies that the fantastical creature upgrade is activated. Please choose one of the creatures. Bangul starts upgrading, and huge lights emerge. The system window informs that Bangul has successfully leveled up and upgraded to level +1. As a reward, Bangul has received a new skill, chomping dirt at level 3. It further notifies about other skills gained, including accelerated dirt digestion at level 3, steel dung launcher at level 3, and volcanic blast at level 1. He is shocked to see this. The system window notifies that the volcanic blast is at level 1. He exclaims that's awesome. After a while at Cremo, the city of commerce nestled between the mountains, an explosion occurs. Everyone turns to look at that side and is shocked. Count Cremo also witnesses the event from the window. Meanwhile, Bangul transforms into a larger size, leaving Lloyd and Javier astonished. He utilizes his skill to examine some particulars and concludes that it's ash, real volcanic ash right there. He asks if Javier sees that, stating it's an absolute gift now, but Javier does not respond. He asks if Javier has gone deaf, to which Javier asks what. He apologizes, realizing he forgot to instruct Javier to cover his ears. He repeats his question, and Javier, still unclear, asks what. He exclaims loudly that he is ugly. Javier retorts that he is not as ugly as he is. Frustrated, he asks if Javier can hear him or not. Javier, still perplexed, asks what. He acknowledges that thanks to Bengal, they have quickly resolved their cement problem and states that the key to construction is speed. Let's begin. He explains that the first stage involves building and installing a giant diaper to filter volcanic ash. There are 5 layers of mesh at the end of the diaper to catch the ash. He comes to the city with Bengal. He covers his ears and says it's going to blow. They all cover their ears and it blows. He then thinks that they should activate Bengal's volcanic blast. He announces again that one more time it's going to blow. Everyone stands there, covering their ears. Count Cremo thinks he can see that he's not an ordinary engineer. He has never heard of these techniques and summoning creatures either. Lloyd believes that in this project he will keep a close eye on him, and then he will give a detailed report to His Majesty the King. He rubs his face with Bengal and thinks that if the rumors are true, then it's a waste to keep him in the backwoods. He believes that once the ingredients for cement have been gathered, it's time for stage 2, making a caisson to pour the cement into and placing it in the sea. He thinks that he will use Hamming's one shot to remove all the water from the caisson, and stage 3 involves covering the bottom of the caisson with friction posts. Javier places a hammer on his shoulder and inquires when the next posts will be received. He says to wait a moment, explaining that they are working hard to deliver them, and he wears a smiling face. Javier asks about the expression, to which he responds that he was contemplating how compliant he has been. He notes that he didn't even utter his usual statement, asserting that he is a knight and questioning why he should perform such tasks. Javier gazes at him, walks away, and remarks that he is a knight, questioning why he should be the one hammering. The other person states that he is the knight escorting him. He adds that if the posts are not hammered in, they won't earn any money, won't be able to clear their debts, and if he succumbs to stress, the Baron will be saddened. Moreover, if he becomes bedridden, the Baroness might also fall ill. Javier glances back at him and Lloyd, who is binding his hand and pleads to protect his family while expressing his willingness to help them. He then steps back and commences working, striking the hammer on the wood block. He contemplates that after completing his regular coaching session with Javier, he will utilize Bengal's steel dung launcher to construct the steel frame. He envisions that ultimately the long-awaited cement will be poured, the caisson will be dismantled once the cement has hardened, and the artificial sea platform will be complete. Standing alongside Count Cremo, he observes the platform and remarks that it is 50 centimeters higher than the water level at high tide. He suggests that placing a mermaid statue there will create the illusion of it floating. He expresses some doubt, saying that, honestly, he can't believe it and questions whether the foundation can truly withstand the weight of the statue. If he does succeed, he assures that he won't be disappointed with the construction fees. He then proceeds to descend. After a while, some boats gather around a golden statue, and people enjoy a party inside the ships. Lloyd Frontera wears a tie and remarks that it is so uncomfortable. He asks Javier how he puts up with these clothes. Javier responds, acting as if it is his first time wearing them, and recalls seeing him wearing similar attire at events from time to time. He notes that it's been a while and thinks Javier looks sharp. Count Cremo announces attention. Everyone, please look over here. This is the young man who made this statue a reality. People praise him and express their admiration for a job well done. The crowd surrounds Javier, ignoring Lloyd Frontera. Someone comments that Javier is so poised, while another person remarks that his face is perfect, as is his talent. Another individual asks if they can shake his hand. Lloyd Frontera believes he is smarter than most. He anticipated that they would all flock over there. He is definitely not jealous and prefers fast money transfers to compliments. Javier, however, finds that look not very pleasant. He becomes lost, avoids eye contact, and stops pitying him. Count Cremo laughs and attributes the attention to Lloyd Frontera's face. He wonders why this guy always follows up with a two-hit combo. Count Cremo places his hand on Lloyd Frontera's shoulder and announces to everyone that this is the man who made the sea platform. They are all shocked, and someone remarks that they thought he was a servant. The partygoers begin to enjoy the celebration. Just then, a lobster arrives, sees the boat, and moves toward it. He declares that there's only one, and they plan to kill it. On the boat, people surround Lloyd Frontera, while Javier enjoys snakes. The girls on the ship start to feel affection for Javier. Sitting on the edge of the ship, Javier holds a wine glass, feeling the chill. Lloyd Frontera approaches and inquires about what he is doing, commenting that he looks like a statue or something. Javier turns his face, clarifying that he doesn't mean he looks as good as a great statue, and asks if Javier is ignoring him. Javier mentions that he senses something approaching. When asked what it is, Javier admits he doesn't know exactly, but it is extraordinarily swift. Lloyd Frontera then questions the size of the approaching object, and Javier states it's about twice the size of the ship, slightly bigger than Hamming, which is the largest. Suddenly, a giant lobster comes into view. Javier quickly approaches Count Cremo and whispers that it seems the Gigatitan is approaching. He insists they must inform the passengers and evacuate everyone. Count Cremo calls Sir Genevan and asks if he detects anything strange far out in the sea. Sir Genevan looks around and states that he does not. Count Cremo informs Lloyd Frontera that Sir Genevan has pretty much reached the sword master status. His senses are extremely sharp and they can trust him. Count Cremo thinks that Javier is even stronger, being the main character, and wonders how to persuade him. Count Cremo reassures them not to worry. In the last few years, the Gigatitan has never come this close, and there's no reason why it would suddenly attack. However, he acknowledges that there may be a reason now and looks at the statues. Count Cremo stares at him, and Sir Genevan says he doesn't understand why they are saying these things, but his senses are telling him nothing is wrong. Count Cremo orders the anchors to be raised, and the boats move away from the statue as the Gigatitan approaches. Workers start moving the ships, urging others to hurry. Observing this, Javier comments that it is taking too long. Lloyd Frontera instructs him to take care of the anchor. Javier quickly moves and jumps into the water with his sword, and Lloyd Frontera frees Pipodong, telling him they need him. Pipodong eats almonds, grows bigger, and lands on the statues. Javier goes down and cuts the anchor with a sword using a mana blast chop. Pipodong also cuts the ropes with his sharp teeth, freeing the ships. Javier proceeds to cut the anchors of other boats one by one. Suddenly, the Gigatitan approaches from behind, and Javier thinks it has sped up. The ships begin to spread out, but the Gigatitan attacks a ship, causing passengers to float in the water. Pipodong sits, hugging the statue, but the Gigatitan breaks it. Javier emerges from the water with his fiery sword and catches Lloyd Frontera from falling. The statue explodes and starts falling into the town, causing destruction, and people become scared. Due to the ship's break, individuals start drowning and scream for help. Someone asks about Ellen's whereabouts. Lloyd Frontera says they can't save all these people. He summons Hamming and instructs him to use one-shot power. Hamming jumps into the sea and starts drinking water. The Gigatitan enters the town and destroys houses. Javier notices the Gigatitan moving towards the city and insists they must stop it. He sees Lloyd Frontera sitting on a broken table, which is upside down, resembling a boat. He asks where Lloyd Frontera is going, pointing out that the Gigatitan is the other way. Lloyd Frontera responds that's why they have to run this way, calling Javier a fool. He questions whether he wants to fight that monster, and if he has lost all his bananas. Count Cremo urges everyone to hurry up, emphasizing that the sea is dangerously cold, and instructs them to get the people out of the water as soon as possible. Hamming dispels people from the water, with individuals calling for help. People on the ships throw ladders to assist and say, "Grab onto this." Meanwhile, the Gigatitan attacks the town, and residents run for help. Lloyd Frontera questions why Javier is just standing there and tells him to come on already. He asks if Javier is ignoring all the people who are in danger. Lloyd Frontera states that they came to make money, not to fight sea monsters or keep the peace. He points out that the city has its own army and artillery, so they will be fine on their own. Lloyd Frontera thinks that in moments of crisis, Javier has shown great ingenuity and a resolve not to give up and not turn his back on those who are struggling. However, Lloyd Frontera argues that they are busy with their own matters and question why they have to protect someone else's city. He suggests that running away is the rational thing to do. Javier reflects that in the end, he realizes this is truly who he is. The system window notifies that Javier's approval rating has decreased by 5 points, but his approval rating is now plus 1 point. It also indicates that his relationship with an important character has worsened, but he assures that they won't lose RP for this, and the current RP is 19 and 1. Javier takes out his sword and declares that he could never do that. Lloyd Frontera advises him to stop trying to be righteous all the time, emphasizing that if he goes back there, he will die. He transforms his sword into a skateboard, utilizes mana blast power, and jumps into the sea. On the other side, people in the castle declare that the cannons are ready and fire. They attack the Gigatitan, and a soldier remarks that it did not even flinch. The Gigatitan's body breaks from the side, and it advances to attack them, destroying everything in its path. It resolves to kill the mermaid, prompting people to start running to save their lives. A man falls down while running, and the Gigatitan moves its leg to attack him. Javier employs his sword with a mana blast and attacks the Gigatitan, wondering if his mana blast slice will bounce off. He falls but quickly moves again, evading the Gigatitan's counterattack. The Gigatitan attempts to attack Javier, but he swiftly moves back to save himself. As it moves to attack again, Javier thinks he can't dodge this and falls back. The Gigatitan moves its horn to attack Javier, who thinks he has tied it up, and this is enough. He acknowledges that he knows he will never beat this kind of monster, and he may even die here, but he refuses to die before ensuring the safety of the people. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera attempts to row the table boat and remarks that it's not like he is some overpowered character. Even if he has RP, it's all construction related, and there's nothing he can do. He questions what he could do even if he went back there, stating that he is human too, and it breaks his heart when the city gets destroyed and people get hurt. He emphasizes that it's not like there's anything he can do. He contemplates that if he runs away like this, the city will be destroyed, and if he leaves it to be destroyed, their construction fee payments will be delayed. Lloyd Frontera instructs Bengal to head back, acknowledging that their construction fee payments will be delayed. Bengal uses the volcanic blast, becomes bigger, and moves toward the city with Lloyd Frontera on his back. Lloyd Frontera curses, saying he is dead meat, the damn oversized lobster. Meanwhile, Javier attempts to fight back against the Gigatitan. He jumps, uses mana blast, and thinks it's still an animal after all, so its weak spot must be its eyes. He pushes the sword into its eyes, and just then, Hameng arrives and attacks it. The Gigatitan throws Hameng back, and he falls on Lloyd Frontera's head. Lloyd Frontera asks how dare he mess with his cash flow. Javier moves to attack, thinking that now is his chance. He attacks with fire, but it has no effect, making him believe it's impossible. He can't get through here either. He struggles to find anywhere to attack it properly, realizing he thought he could win initially, but now he doesn't see a way yet. Wondering why he feels so calm, he attributes it to Master Lloyd's return, interpreting his return as a sign that there is a way to beat it. The scene shifts to 2.5 minutes earlier, with Lloyd Frontera riding on Podong's back, instructing not to get too close and to take them around so it can't detect them. They reach near the Gigatitan, and Lloyd Frontera thinks he needs to find its weak spot. Javier continues to attack it repeatedly, and Lloyd Frontera observes him, realizing that Javier's mana blast is having absolutely no effect. He wonders how it is so strong and what it is made of. He contemplates what it is made of and thinks that's it. He wonders if it is possible to survey it. He uses his skill, detects its weak spot, and thinks it's nice that even living things are made out of something. After all, they can be surveyed. He analyzes that it's a mixture of dentin and chitin, a whopping 1 meter thick. At the molecular level, it's a triple-layer honeycomb structure tightly woven together, forming a state-of-the-art armor. Javier moves to attack, and it blasts. He wonders what that is, realizing that the energy from Javier's attack migrates to a single spot. He figures out that the energy collects in its hollow horn and is then released. Determining that the first thing they need to do is cut off that horn, the system notifies simulation mode. Lloyd Frontera detects its body and identifies a spot where there's a water sac for its hydraulic claw. If they strike that area in this direction with a mana blast, they can destroy that thing. Javier asks what they should do. Lloyd Frontera makes gestures with his hands to indicate a slicing motion. Javier questions if he has lost all control of himself. Lloyd Frontera continues making gestures with his hands and instructs it to cut off its horn. Javier jumps from there and falls on it, thinking that even if he cuts off its horn, it won't be fatal, but Master Lloyd Frontera would never say anything he could not stand behind. He moves to attack, and Lloyd Frontera mentions that even though the horn is hollow, cutting it won't be easy. Mana circles are not all about hitting hard. Javier asks what he should do. Lloyd Frontera advises him to do it fast, even if it's weaker, emphasizing a lightning-quick approach. Javier attacks, remarking that it is easier said than done. He cuts the Gigatitan using his magic, and a huge light emanates from it. Lloyd Frontera thinks it's working, describing it as a high-frequency mana chainsaw. It was just a theory, but he knew Javier could pull it off. The Gigatitan screams, and Javier attempts to cut its horn. Lloyd Frontera orders Peepodong to attack, and Peepodong goes after the Gigatitan. Javier successfully cuts its horn. Lloyd Frontera stands on top of a house, observing this, and instructs it to aim for the area right between where its middle legs meet and from its tail toward its head at an angle. He mentions that their construction repayment won't be delayed if Javier gets in a mana blast from that direction. Javier approaches its leg to attack, but the Gigatitan counterattacks, throwing his sword away. Lloyd Frontera is shocked upon seeing this. Javier contemplates his impending doom and finds himself between Peepodong and the Gigatitan. Suddenly, Peepodong arrives, swiftly grabbing Javier and pulling him away. Lloyd Frontera excitedly praises Peepodong's intervention, and Javier apologizes to Master Peepodong, assuming he might be scolding him for his reckless behavior as he retrieves his sword from the ground. Javier gazes at the Gigatitan, expressing his determination to stay alive until they defeat it and trusting Master Lloyd's plans.